Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Linda, for beginning. I'm not sure how we call that with that song, because honestly, listening to those voices, and forgive me, I didn't sing, I listened, was so emotional for me, because that song just sums up everything that's been in my heart since the beginning of this weekend. And thanks a lot, because you almost made me cry right at the beginning, which does not bode well for the rest of this lesson. Thanks for that. And I have to thank Marnie and Heidi for leading those devotionals. You've really touched my heart and fed my thoughts, and of course helped me to stay up and wake up early to edit my lesson, because all of these ideas that you had, I think, just fed into a new lesson that emerged. And all the conversations I've been able to have with people throughout the weekend have really humbled me and taught me. So and for the organizers, obviously, Erin and Cindy and everyone else who had a hand in this would not have happened without you. I know it's a lot of work, especially with me emailing you all the time to ask for stuff. So thank you for this weekend of refreshing and of encouragement. I will go home with a sore throat and a happy, happy heart. So now, despite all those wonderful conversations, I want to start this lesson with a conversation I had with my children. Because out of everyone in the entire world, I have learned the most about God from the voices of my innocent, childlike children. They have taught me, informed me, and made my life a happier, noisier, messier place. So I want to share this conversation I had with them right before coming here. I'll just make sure it's loud enough. I'll just skip through that.
Fishbowl.
A fishbowl is like something where a fish has to go in.
Would you want to live in a fishbowl?
No.
And who are you?
Ada.
And do you like church?
And I like it. Buddy. I like it.
Oh, the church building?
Yeah.
You like why is it hard to follow God?
Because you know that some people are bad and some people aren't. You know that you gotta get used to people and you gotta get used to other people.
Do you like being judged?
No.
Why not?
Because then we get in a fight.
What's the most important thing to tell people?
Sharing. Supposed to share and be kind and do everything to another and to pray and to be friends. Another.
You can tell one of them has been in Sunday school because like to another and another. I know there's something about another that it keeps going on and on and on about. So those are some of the thoughts that kind of informed me and kept me going through the weekend. Because I do learn from my kids, and they remind me about what's really important. Mommy, you promised you weren't going to yell at me anymore. Stuff like that humbles me and brings me back down to earth. It is. Now, this lesson is called A Big Fish, or Big Fish, and I don't think we can talk about it without bringing up Jonah. One of my absolute favorite books in the Old Testament, partly because it's like 4 chapters, so you can read through it in an hour or so and really digest things. And Jonah has always intrigued me because isn't that one of the stories that's so popular in children's programs for good reason? It's an easy story to follow. But as adults, when you come back to it, there's so many more layers to digest. So when we start with the story of Jonah, we start in chapter 1 when Jonah runs away from God. Right? Jonah got up, went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. I've always found that language really interesting because, of course, God told him, go to Nineveh, tell them to repent. And we focus on, Nineveh was like ancient Iraq and Syria, and that was a really bad place, right? They were doing horrible things. And I still remember a lesson from Kevin Carson, I think a long time ago. It haunted me about the things that the Ninevites would do to their enemies, the terrible, terrible things that they would do during times of war or times of conquering. But here it says he ran away, he'd get away from the Lord. not Nineveh necessarily, although he was running away the opposite direction. He wanted to get away from the Lord and the Lord's command to go to Nineveh. And keep that in mind as the rest of it happens. Now, of course, on the boat, he gets tossed off the boat. You know that part of the story. Now, the Lord had arranged for a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. And that echoes some of the future events in the Bible. And here we think about the great fish. I always pictured a whale. I always pictured Jonah sitting sort of on a big tongue and thinking, right? And so some of the images you see in coloring books is something like this, right? He looks very neat in that picture. His hair is combed a little bit. Yeah, there's little fish bones there. It's a very cute picture. And I'm not saying that's wrong, because, they're children, right? And here's another picture. It's kind of dark, but you see, it's dark. There's a storm, lightning on top. The Bible verse is not able to read, sorry. But there's that little light in the middle is a cross section of a big fish, and there's Jonah praying on his knees on the tongue, right? These are the images we show our children, and again, I'm not saying those are wrong, but think about being in the belly of a fish. Just smelly, and also a little dark, right? There's not going to be a little candle for you. You're going to be in complete pitch blackness. When you go swimming, and you think of swimming, has anyone gone night swimming? Yeah, I don't actually recommend this. It's terrifying because it's dark. You do not know what you are touching. And so imagine Jonah in the belly of a fish, to be swallowed by a fish. Yeah, it's going to be smelly and squishy, and you're not going to be able to see. And Jonah says this in chapter 2, verse 7. As my life was slipping away, I remembered the Lord, and my earnest prayer went out to you in your holy temple. So from that dark, dark, dark place of, I'm not sure if it was still, but it was definitely dark, cast that prayer up to God. He remembered God. He prayed. And God, I cried out to the Lord in my great trouble as my life was, and he remembered me. And then he made this promise, and you'll have to go to Jonah 2:9 because I forgot to make the text fade out, so it's, again, and not able to read it, but I will offer sacrifices to you as songs of praise, and I will fulfill all my vows, for my salvation comes from the Lord. So here he is, repenting, promising God that he's going to go do what God told him to do. And so God tells him to get up and go. Have people told you, get up and go? The idea of that, to me, at this point in my life, is to pick yourself up and go. 2 steps. Get up and go. And so for a lot of us, I think that's what we need to do sometimes, is when we are in our darkest moments, we need to pick ourselves up with God's strength and God's grace and go and do what God told us to do, whatever that may be. So he obeys. Jonah obeys, and in chapter 3, and I really like the structure, whoever parsed out the verses in the Bible, because it's Jonah 1, Jonah 2, Jonah 3. He goes. He does it. This time, I like that too. I love the language of the book of Jonah. This time, Jonah obeyed the Lord's command, and he went to Nineveh. And again, you know this story. He shouted the word of God. The people repented, and God was like, all right, I'm not going to burn your city down. I'm not going to destroy your city. And then what does Jonah do? What does Jonah do? It's not fair. It's not fair. So Jonah complains. And in Jonah 4, verses 1 to 2, this change of plans, again, he's complaining about God's change of plans. Not to mention that he got swallowed by a big fish, cried out to God, and God had the fish spit him up and tell him to get up and go. Right? I'm not sure it happened that long ago in his memory that he could remember that he himself was the recipient of God's grace. But here he's like, God, you changed your mind. I look like an idiot. I told them that God was going to destroy them, and now you're like, oh, they repented, so I'm going to have mercy. So he greatly upset. He became very angry, so he complained to the Lord about it. And so then we have that beautiful lesson where we have the vine growing, the creeping vine, and then God causes it to wither. And Jonah mourns the vine because of the worm that ate it. He's sad about the vine. And God says, wait, hold on. You're sad about that plant, and there were how many people in that city? And you didn't care about them. So God says, But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness, not to mention all the animals. Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city? And to me, that's the lesson I take away from the story of Jonah is, shouldn't I feel sorry for that many people? Shouldn't we have compassion on them? So this is a picture of a tattoo mistake. It's a little bit dark. But if you could see it, it might make you laugh, because here we have north, south. I think it's south is over there, right? Which is incorrect, right? It's not right, and it's embarrassing because it's a tattoo. But I think this is what happens in our minds when we get concerned with God's plans, when we think we can tell God, this is the right thing for me or those people who are doing bad things. We get our compass mixed up, right? Where it's not pointing in the right direction. We're not looking in the right way. Because when we don't have compassion, we don't have love, we're looking at ourselves, we might be looking at other people, but we're not looking upward. We're not looking with the eyes of God. And God tells us, shouldn't I be sorry for them? Shouldn't I go out and help them? They're repenting. Why can't I forgive them? I'm God, after all. So we need to remember that we need to look upward. We need to look and see what God thinks about our world, what God tells us to do about other people, and go from there. So that's the story, just a quick overview of the story of Jonah to talk about how we need to look upward. Now, we also need to look outward. Hold on. Let's just move this a little closer. There we go. And, while I'm at it, let's just focus it just a little bit more. How's that? Yeah. All right. So, when you ask for help on some online forum and they ask you, is this helpful? Not helpful. Or I need to report a concern. Have you ever got that little quiz on the end? So a lot of people want to be helpful, and you got to give them kudos for that. Thank you for being helpful. But they're being helpful in a very unhelpful way. Do you know what I mean? Helpful in an unhelpful way. For example, I saw this sign here. It says, tired of being fat and ugly? Just be ugly. 24-hour fitness. Yeah. Helpful, not helpful. Thanks very much, right? So the way that you tell people things, the way that you express your help is important. Let me give you a real world example, and I promise this is the last time I'm going to talk about my kids, okay? His name is Kyle. He's a member of the Church of Christ in Winnipeg. His whole family has been so nice to us because they've seen us in all our messy glory and have just helped us quietly. Shuffled our children away from us, given them snacks, whatever it is. They haven't said anything to us about we should do this, we should do that, which, sometimes I wish they would, because they're so awesome at taking care of our family. But they're very quiet about their help. It's wonderful and encouraging to me. But Kyle has a very special relationship with Jacob. And I know I can't do it. That's actually Daniel. He has a special relationship with Daniel too. But with Jacob, he has a bond. And Jacob will just, in a room of 300 people, he will just go straight to Kyle. Because Kyle showed him love. Some of you have visited our old house in Winnipeg, and it's kind of got like a living room like this, just an open, and over there there's a door to the washroom. Just a plain sight. Everyone can see where you're going if you go there. Okay? And Jacob was just sort of on the end of his potty training, shall we say. So he goes to poop. And he leaves the door open because he doesn't want to miss any of the conversation. So he's sitting there pooping in full view of all our guests, but nobody's really noticing because he doesn't say, he's not like Daniel. He doesn't announce it. He goes and he sits quietly. And Kyle's over here, and they're making eye contact, and they're just having a conversation. Just like, hey, how are you? What's going on? Did you like that movie, Jacob? Oh, it's so about superheroes. They're just shouting across at each other. Just totally normal. He's a child. He has no shame about what he's doing. He doesn't know better. And they're just having this crazy conversation. And then somebody notices, and they start to laugh. And I don't fault them for that because it was really funny. Okay? I don't fault them for the laughing, but that makes Jacob cry. Because now he feels shame. He starts to cry. And do you know what Kyle does? Oh my goodness. I'm too tired to be giving these emotional talks. He walks over, just no word, doesn't tell that guy off, doesn't tell that girl off, doesn't say anything to the people who are laughing, doesn't say anything to Jacob, walks over, walks into the bathroom, closes the door, continues the conversation. Sweet. But right. Because he knew better. He knew that Jacob should have closed the door, but he didn't say anything because Jacob was not at that stage yet that he cared. He understood that mental age. And he understood what to do to prevent the shame from going on. He just walked over. And he knew that they were wrong for laughing. Well, not that they were wrong, but that was making Jacob uncomfortable, right? He knew, didn't say anything to them, didn't say anything. Just by his actions, he showed the way to deal with it. I will always treasure that moment in my heart because it gave me an example of what I should do with my brothers and sisters as well. That other person may not be in the same level of faith as you. And maybe they don't need to hear that yet. Maybe we need to go, it sounds condescending, but like go to their level, meet them where they are. You don't need to teach them that much. Let's start with one step at a time. Let's be gentle about our instruction with people. So I will always treasure that moment. And it does remind me of this verse. That's Matthew 7, 3-5. And this verse, this story has always resonated with me, made me laugh about the sense of humor that Jesus must have had to tell this story. When you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your eye, how can you say to your brother, hey, let me take out that speck in your eye. I'm going to help you. Helpful, not helpful. Right? But all the time there's a plank in your own eye. You hypocrite. First take out the plank of your own eye and then you will see clearly to move the speck from your brother's eye. I mean, just imagine this. Just imagine like hiding. You can't get close enough to see. Like, look at if you got okay, no, that's dangerous. You have a plank in your eye, and I can't even reach to take the speck. I can't even see to reach to take the speck out of your eye. And here's the thing about that story. You know how we use that story often, and I love this contrast. We usually think, hey, you got a plank in your eye, don't try to take out my speck. That's how we use that, do we not? We take it and we turn around and say, you hypocrite, you have so many problems, you dare to tell me about the speck in my eye. That's not what this is saying. This is not talking to that person with the speck in the eye. They're talking to you. You have a plank in your eye. Take it out and then help your brother. The best thing about it, it's not telling you not to help your brother either. It's telling you, look inward first. Look inward first. Take out the plank so that you can see. So we change the perspective just a little bit to see it from another way, to make it actually helpful and helpful, not helpful, not helpful. Thanks a lot. So sometimes when we look outward, we need to think small, move slowly, measure differently. Think small, move slowly, measure differently. So for thinking small, from Galatians, one of the most famous verses in the Bible, in the fruits of the Spirit passage, Galatians 5:22-23a, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance or patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These are the fruits that should be manifested in our lives in big ways, but also in small ways. We can't ignore the small ways. The way that I say a word to my sister or my brother is a small way, maybe. The ends do not justify the means in Christianity, right? So all these big ideas should also be filtered down in every small action that we take. Yes, it's hard. No, we're not perfect. We're trying our best. Give each other a little bit of grace now and again, too. Another thing, move slowly. Be patient. This is something that we wrestle with, I think, because in the outside of the church world, we're not patient. Get the job done, quickly, efficiently. Do your job right or get out. But not so in the church. Brothers and sisters, we urge you to warn those who are lazy, encourage those who are timid, to take tender care of those who are weak. Be patient with everyone. Be patient. Wait. It's okay if it doesn't get done super fast, right? Let the person grow. Jacob's not ready to close the door when he's pooping. He wants to be a part of the party. So give him time to grow into that idea. Measure with mercy. So in Colossians 1:13, it says, for he has rescued us from the kingdom of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of his dear Son. Now, why does that matter? Well, because remember where you were before you met Christ. Remember that you have been given mercy, been taken out of the kingdom of darkness, and now you are a child of God. Remember that. And so when you remember that, remember Jude 1:22, and you must show mercy to those whose faith is wavering. There. Show mercy to those whose faith is wavering. So if I see someone who's struggling with something, instead of booting them out right away, maybe I should show them some mercy. Show them some grace. Be helpful. Not helpful, not helpful. So now, we look upward, we look outward, and we look also inward. And this is maybe the hardest thing for me. Because looking inward, it's easier to get busy. I think I really took that lesson from Marnie's talk last night. It's easy to get busy doing stuff instead of focusing on, the stuff I need to change. Not even the stuff I need to change in myself, but like, hey, where am I at spiritually right now with my Father in heaven? But I'll help you with your problem first. Let me fix everything for you. And that's really hard. So meeting people where they're at is hard. And I forgot to mention this. One of my jobs at Norquest, who I'm sure you understand now, I both love and also I'm very angry at, was working with a program called Youth in Transition. And some of you knew me during that time. It was the time when Jay was in Afghanistan, so I had a lot of time on my hands, no kids, lots of time, to work with troubled youth. We called it Youth in Transition. What it really meant was last stop before jail. That was the program. And we had a lot of different people, but we had to meet them where they are. You don't teach kids in that program calculus right away, although that's where they want to go. They want to get there. But you can't just jump into calculus because they can't write their name, right? You know what their goal is. Their goal is to get into university, but they're like, I'm not there yet. So a lot of the things we taught them were like skills like, hey, remember those binders with tabs? Yeah? Where do you write the section? Like if it's math, where do you write that? It's pretty obvious, right? It's obvious to you. What's obvious to you is obvious to you. It wasn't obvious to them. You know where they wrote it? In the middle of the page. Not on the tab. Why would I write it on that tiny piece? There's a big space right here. Okay? That's the kind of thing that we taught. Because that's where they were. You start where people are. If someone wants to become a Christian and they're over here, you start where they are. Somebody else might be over here. You start where they are. And it was hard because everyone's got a different background. Shall I say background, right? Some people's suffering is different from other people's suffering. It's not a suffering competition. You just start where you are. So I want to tell you a fishbowl fairy tale. I'm going to read it. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a man and a woman of noble blood. But a cruel king threatened to kill them, so they fled across the sea. They were poor, but happy in their new land, and soon they had a daughter. The girl grew up happily with the love of her parents, who sheltered her in a life much simpler, yet much more peaceful than the one they had before. But though this was a land of peace and plenty, darkness still searched for its victims. And one day, while the girl was playing in a field with her friends, a wolf came, dressed in the form of a man. The wolf dragged the girl away and tried to violate her, but when he discovered that he was unable to do it, he beat her until his rage receded. The girl dragged herself home and hid her injuries from her parents. And then she grew, but she grew up sharp and angry. To hide her shame, she began to build a tower of achievements. She danced, she excelled in academics, and she fought to rise above every task that was given to her. But as her tower grew, so did her isolation. The girl found herself alone in a crystal palace atop her ever-growing tower. And still her shame threatened to overtake her. And then one day she returned home to find that her younger, sweeter, and less strong sister was near death, covered in blood from trying to slit her own wrists. In that moment, all the girl's defenses crumbled, and she could drag herself further no more. In her despair, she heard the light and say to her, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." And finally, she did call to the light. And as soon as her secret wounds were torn open again, they began to heal. Exposed to the light, he healed the rot in her heart. In the quiet of her crystal bowl, she discovered peace. No, she was not a perfect princess that she made herself out to be. And yes, her scars were ugly. But she received a new heart, and the light showed her what was truly important, and the walls kept her safe from her enemies. And then she met other sons and daughters of the light, scarred but healing. And it didn't matter that their suffering was great or small or different. They bore each other up, and the girl discovered that her fishbowl was not a prison, it was her protection. And we are many parts of one body, and we all belong to each other. Rejoice in our confident hope, be patient in trouble, and keep on praying. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. This girl could be me, it might be you, and it doesn't matter. It is not a suffering competition. If you want to talk about suffering in war, talk to Louise. If you want to talk about the suffering of moving from one country and leaving your family behind, talk to Yola, talk to Silmara. Or you could talk to someone who has the suffering of aging parents, or an overbearing mother, or children who will not do what you want them to do, or follow the God that you follow. It could even be that your suffering is you have a perfect family, you have perfect grades, you have a perfect whatever, but you still feel the ache of something missing. It's not a suffering competition. I do not want to be defined by my suffering. I want to be defined by the light that God is able to shine through me and help other people who might be suffering in a similar way. This verse, thank you Marnie for this last night, is inspiring. It's from Psalm 46. First part is from verses 1 to 3. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. Do you know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like a dare. Bring it on. The world outside is scary and terrible and horrible things are happening. Let the oceans roar. Let everything be turned over. But be still and know that I am God. That really impacted me last night. Be still. In my head, you're still and everything around you is falling apart. But you are still because you know that He is God. Knowing He is God. Why can you be still? Because He's God. Anything that happens outside of this protection, yes, is bad, but I can be still because He's my refuge and He will protect my heart and my soul. He's my hope and my salvation. So, Psalm 28, the Lord is my strength and my shield. I trust in Him with all my heart. He helps me, and my heart is filled with joy. I burst out in songs of thanksgiving because that fishbowl we've been talking about doesn't necessarily have to be bad. What's keeping you separate from the world is like a protection from the world. That evil that is insidious and can get into your heart and change everything about you, God can keep that away from you if you let Him. So we don't have to think about the fishbowl as, the little glass bowl with one fish in it. Some of you went to the Stand conference and you got to see Ripley's Aquarium, some of you. If you think about Ripley's Aquarium, they have that tunnel? You walk through and there's sharks and stingrays, and dolphins, there's catfish, there's all kinds of life. It is a beautiful ecosystem that is, in essence, a really big fishbowl. But instead of being like, oh, look at that poor fish, he's stuck in a bowl, it's, wow, isn't that amazing? And isn't that what we want people to see when we see our body of believers? Wow, isn't that amazing? Look how God has made them, though they come from different backgrounds and have different kinds of suffering, different talents, different strengths, different weaknesses. They all come together, they live together in harmony. There's sharks, there's manta rays, there's catfish, there's plants that go like this. There's all kinds of things. We're all different, but we're all beautiful because we are living together as an ecosystem, protected from the outside world. So when we talk about faith and freedom in a frustrating world, this is what I think about. That verse, Isaiah 40:31. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. I think that's my foundation. I trust in the Lord. That's my faith. I trust in Him. I will soar high on wings like eagle. I will soar above that temptation. I will be able to fly above this world because I have hope in an eternal salvation. I will run and not grow weary. That means I will be able to persevere. Me and running, we're not friends. But I can persevere. I can make it work. I can keep going. I will drag myself because I can go to God and he will give me rest. And finally, I will walk and not be faint. I can walk upright in a really frustrating world because I have the grace and the strength that comes from God. So we can trust. If we trust, we can soar, we can run, and we can walk by God's grace. So faith and freedom in a frustrating world. Well, faith in our Lord gives us strength and freedom so we can face our frustrating world or our frustration. And that's the core of all of these lessons, is basically that faith in our Lord gives us strength and freedom so we can face our frustration.